Sony is under fire. We already knew the company was attacked by hackers who broke into its gaming networks. Now Sony is saying the breach was even bigger than previously known. Hackers gained access to an additional 23,000 credit and debit card records, and personal information for almost 25 million people was compromised. Daniel Ernst, president and technology analyst at Hudson Square Research, is with us by phone this morning to talk about Sony. Dan, let's start with the cost. How much do you think this is going to cost Sony in the end? How much of a hit will it be to earnings?
Yeah, I think that's way too early to say, and I think that buried in all the issues relative to the earthquake and the tsunami, I don't think this is going to be particularly material. I mean, the game division has actually been doing rather well. After 4 years of losses this year, they're on track to post their first gain since the current gaming cycle began in 2006.
Okay, but
it's unfortunate, but I don't think it's going to change that momentum.
Okay, well, that's the important point. You don't think that Sony, the potential customers of PlayStation 3 and participants in these networks are going to be scared off in the slightest after this revelation?
You know, there's always going to be a normal distribution curve around that. You're going to have some people that are, some people that aren't. You know, Xbox went through 2 years where they had so many fail rates on the devices, they ended up having to take $1 billion charge on all the returns. And, you know, it hit them for a while, and they moved past that. So I don't think it's going to change the dynamics of the console cycle or Sony's market share. This is a universal problem. Right? Last month, J.P. Morgan Chase revealed that an outside company they use called Epsilon, that none of us had ever heard of before, had a security breach, and customer information was released in that. So, you know, Apple and Google are tracking your whereabouts on smartphones, and who knows what Facebook's got. This is a universal problem, and I think that there needs to be a big change in the way the personal data is dealt with, but I don't think it's unique to Sony.
Okay, no, there's no question it is not unique to Sony, but what one company will do differently from another is respond to this challenge. And in Sony's case, I don't need to remind you, it took them 6 days to figure out what was going on, and now they're saying that they didn't actually have a handle on the problem. So for a company that has faced as much adversity and made as many missteps, shall we say, as Sony, this cannot reflect well on management, can it?
Actually, I completely disagree. They held a very common apology press conference for a Japanese company. I don't think early on in a security breach it's probably prudent to release much information as you're trying to work through the investigation. They're working with the FBI on that in the United States. So I think they've handled it very, very well. So I actually completely disagree with that statement.
The premise, it's not so much my opinion. Dan, let's talk about the prospects for Sony shares. You have a $44 target on the stock. How soon do you think it can get there?
Well, I think it's a function, you know, of how they progress through the bigger crisis, which is dealing with the manufacturing delay. So I think that, you know, that remains to be seen. You know, the earnings aren't out till later in the month, and we're entering the slow period for consumer electronic sales over the summer. So I think it's going to, you know, most of the industry will take a little bit of a breather here. And, you know, like I say, I think Sony has a lot bigger issues to deal with relative to working through the earthquake and the resulting material impact on earnings, and then we'll move forward from there.
Well, we'll all be watching to see how it does. Dan, thanks very much for joining us. Some valuable perspective on the hack attack at Sony from Dan Ernst. He's the president and consumer technology analyst at Hudson Square Research here in New York City.